First of all, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is a fantastic turnout, and probably the largest budget forum ever. So maybe Zoom is the way to go. I want to begin again with a word of thanks to everybody, faculty, staff, administration, for all of the work that's gone on since the pandemic situation arose. It is really tremendous the way that the institution has pulled together in really difficult circumstances. And I just again want to repeat my thanks and to transmit to the university community the thanks of the Board of Governors for all of the work and all of the tremendous time that people have put in to make sure that this transition worked. The board met on Monday and Tuesday and approved the 2020-2021 operating budget. As you will have seen, or probably will have seen, it's a balanced budget. And I want to thank again everyone who has made this possible. The budget team, the deans and directors, faculty and staff who have generated the kind of results last year that enable us to balance the budget this year with a very pleasant outcome for students. And I'll leave those introductory remarks there and turn it over to our team to give you an overview of the budget.
Thanks, Tom.
If I can just interrupt for a second, Kathy, could Janet, Haroon, and Colleen please turn off your cameras? We just want to see the main team on the screens right now. Thank you. If I have to do it, then I got to let you back in, so it's easier if you turn off your own camera. Haroon, if you could comply, turn off your camera, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thanks, Steve. So I want to begin by acknowledging we're gathered here virtually on Treaty 4 territory, and that the university has a presence in Treaty 6 territory. These are traditional territories of the Cree, the Saulteaux, the Dakota, the Lakota, and Nakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis. Thank you everybody for being here this afternoon. The theme of this year's budget is calm, caring, and compassion. It is a people-first budget, it is a student-centric budget, it is a faculty-centric budget, and it is a staff-centric budget. I think it's a budget that the executive team strongly stands behind and something that we can all be proud of. The campus has really pulled together to support our students and each other, and all of us are thankful for that. And we also want to thank CCB for all the hard work they've done over the year. So please note that we will be recording the presentations and discussions today so that folks that are not able to join us are able to view it at a later date. We do ask that you turn on your camera and microphone to make a comment to indicate your consent. We also to have your speech and image recorded. And this is pretty common for us. We always record the budget forums and put them up online so people can look later. So today we're going to be going through a number of different points. We're going to start with the 2021 operating budget highlights, as the president just referred to. Then we're going to move on to provincial operating and capital support and other revenue increases. Then we're going to talk about the ever important contributions from the Center of Continuing Education. We're going to talk about tuition, funding decisions for academic research and operations. Then we're going to have a discussion on the ancillary budgets and status, and then go through a couple examples of the budget letter details.
Super, thank you very much for that introduction, Kathy. I'll just add to what the president mentioned in terms of the unique times that we're in. And of course, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We're in a situation that some describe as an economic crisis that hopefully we only experience once in a career. And of course, many of you are experiencing some form of uncertainty and challenge in either your immediate family or extended family and friends, and indeed our business colleagues outside the university are definitely experiencing a very strange economic environment, which is adding stress for everyone. It doesn't help when we take and read the press of things that are happening around us. And if we look to the east, of course, in Manitoba, they've backed off some of their earlier projections and asking post-secondary institutions to create scenarios for 10, 20, and 30% cuts. and have now said, don't worry, it won't be more than 10, if that's comforting. It wouldn't be for me. Similarly, we looked to the other side, and of course, Alberta had massive 10% cuts following a 6% cut last year, and places like University of Alberta announcing 1,000 layoffs. We can look to the north. Last week, our colleagues at U of S announced without any details the prospects of perhaps 500 staff layoffs at their university to be announced over the coming days. And even here in the city, we've seen announcements of 500 employees being laid off and seasonal employees, 300 seasonal employees not being called back. So lots of stress and strife within every which way we look, and so much uncertainty. So we're glad to finally be able to have this budget approved and out. And as Kathy has so ably mentioned, the theme is calm, caring, and compassion. Just students first, and of course, faculty and staff, supportive budget to be able to take and give certainty to those in our immediate community. Hopefully today we'll give you, we'll be able to explain that, and we'll give you confidence of how and why the university is able to do this. So first of all, and we've tried to get some announcements out early to be able to have a little bit of the grasp of what's going to be announced, but no tuition increases. And in fact, there is a small tuition reduction in one particular program in the MBA specialty program dealing with international that David will talk about later. And no additional student fee increases, so nothing hidden in that regard at all. In terms of your own faculty, research or admin unit budgets, no cuts at all. We're describing this as a status quo budget. It's the 26th consecutive balanced budget that we've had at the university. And even though it's status quo, I'd reassure you further that not only is there no cuts to any of these budgets, but in fact, there is a significant enough increase in every faculty, every admin unit to take and address the increases in the negotiated salaries in each of the collective agreements. So all of that will be honored, the salary increase amounts, and it amounts to, by the way, we'll show you a slide later on as well, 6.6 million of new investment into all of our units, basically to cover salary increases. So we want, in this time of great uncertainty, we do recognize that there's so many different changes and such, but felt that these are one-time changes. These are things that we can take and manage as we go through this next year, and that we hopefully get back to a state of balance and certainty at our campus as we go forward. So you might ask, how is this possible with all of our colleagues across the country, around the world, as a matter of fact? So here's the basics of it. First of all, unlike the other provinces who have, particularly on either side of us, who have been talking about 10% cuts, you may recall that the provincial budget, while not a complete budget, did come down enough to give us our full budget announcement for this year. And indeed, there was a 1% increase in our government grant. On the next slide, I'll tell you some other good news with respect to other funding that came from the province as well. But the basic grant did increase by 1% in our case. And next, it's made possible by the good work for everybody that is on this call. As the president mentioned, if it wasn't for all of that recruiting success, if it wasn't for those increased teaching levels last year, amounting to almost 6%, we wouldn't have banked enough money to be able to take and balance the budget this year. So it is that effort that the entire campus has done over the past year that is carrying us forward into this year and enabling us to take and pay for the salary increases and maintain activity levels at the same level as they are right now. So let me talk a little bit more detail of those specific numbers. And so these are both new incoming money. I mentioned the 1% that the government grant was provided by the government. It amounts to $1.07 million. We also benefited from the Saskatchewan University's funding model. This is just how the pie, once the government allocates it to the two universities, how that pie is divided amongst the two universities. So many of you would have heard before that we take, and there's a formula that calculates the activity levels, both numbers of enrollments, other general activities around the campus, and a big component is the research activity. This is a 1-year lag with a 5-year averaging, and it has worked in our favor for the past number of years, mainly because our enrollment has been increasing far more quickly than that of U of S. So it drives another $540,000 of net new base budget income to us. And 4 years ago, the government announced that it would no longer be funding the Mackenzie Art Gallery. So they were funding to the tune of $400,000. They've been reducing it for $100,000 by $100,000 a year, and it has been flowing through the university. So this is the last year that we'll get, well, it's decreased by another 100,000 this year, so it's now zeroed. You'll see in another spreadsheet where we take and spend our money, we have agreed with Mackenzie Art Gallery, since they manage and maintain our president's art collection, that we will pay them in lieu of the province, and we'll be funding them to the tune of $250,000. So you'll see a payment there of an additional 150. Small change in the SIOS scholarship funding, basically right-sizing it to the actuals, and a change in how we're accounting for funding to La Cité and Le Bac. Those two programs always had uncertainty at this time of the year because the federal money comes at a different timing through the province to the university than the normal university budget. So we normally start them off at this time of the year with a whole bunch of uncertainty with an unfunded liability in their account. In considering the care and compassion that we want for all units for this year, we felt it was appropriate for the university to take the risk of whether the federal money would be forthcoming or not. We are quite certain that it will come, but nevertheless, the university, to our partners at La Cité, are saying, you can be guaranteed that this money is coming, the university will backstop it, and we're giving this money to them up front. Don't think that they're rich, that this is new money. Most of this money is just what would have been predicted, but normally is out of cycle. Some other revenue increases, and these are the ones that you have created for us. First of all, the $4.8 million was the additional revenue last year, above and beyond the 1.5% that we had projected we would get. We, of course, had enrollments higher than that. It generates a base budget amount of $4.8 million. That is one of our saving graces. In addition, the next line, $511,000, is the tuition that comes from the spring and summer session. We do our approvals and our tuition funding and increases on a fiscal year, but of course the academic year is a slightly different timing. So this reflects last year's tuition increase, but it drives another $511,000 to the bottom line. And then the next line, normally we would have a number in here that would reflect the new enrollment and or normally two lines, one for new enrollment increases and one for new tuition increases. In both cases, those numbers are zero. We're being conservative with respect to enrollment growth compared to other years. And David will talk a little bit more about enrollment in some future slides, but no tuition, no enrollment growth, so no additional revenues there. Let me talk about some other government granting. And normally we wouldn't spend this much time on this particular component at a budget forum, but it's different this year and we have more good news. First of all, the one that is no change at all for about the last 10 years, preventive maintenance and renewal. This is money we get on the capital side of the house, mainly for bricks and mortar, 3.5 million of this goes to the facilities management people just to take and keep us operating on the facility side of things. But it also has a major component of paying some past capital investment. But the largest part, in addition to that, is for equipment. So most of that computer equipment to keep the IS support systems going, as well as some money for common area equipment, classroom equipment, etc. What's interesting on this slide is then the next bullet. Some really good news here. A bit of a surprise. We got a call about 10 days ago from the province saying they were interested in their own stimulus initiative, knowing that they need to take and help get the economy going here in the province, and asked the university specifically, what projects could you get going quickly over the next 2 years to take and stimulate the economy? They had since come back and said, what could you do in 1 year? Well, it's remarkable. The facilities management folks turned that request around in under 24 hours, presented a list to the province of over $24 million of different projects. And we anticipate that we will get more than a fair share of that. In fact, we should know within a couple of weeks, perhaps even at the end of this week, but we're thinking we'll get at least $3.5 million. Based on the reputation of being able to spend these federal government or provincial government initiative projects, our track record, the indication is we might get even more than our normal share. The good part of this is the types of projects that it will take and permit. Most of them actually will help with another important initiative in our strategic plan, and that's our sustainability and our carbon footprint. Many of the projects we've put forward will take and reduce our footprint, things like new boiler, new chiller. There's 4 new roof replacements on the project, a number of other things like power factor correction, controls, fan replacements. And in addition to that, not necessarily a sustainable one, but we've got a replacement for the biology field station in Cypress Hills that seemed to be very attractive to the provincial folks, so they could take and share some of the investment around the province. Again, nothing certain yet, but we anticipate some good news in that regard. And the third bullet deals with a major federal initiative of some sort. We're quite certain there's money in past budget that was approved for initiatives that are outside of our sector. We think since the post-secondary education sector was so successful in past KIP and SIF projects that they may allow us to take and participate in that program. And there's other rumors that there might be either augmentation to that program or a specific post-secondary education one. And we're ready for that one as well. You would have heard us talk before about an initiative for a new business school building in the northwest corner of the campus. That would be not only incredible for the faculty of business, but also for the entire campus, as it would have facilities in that serve everyone, and the backfilling of the space vacated by the business school will benefit many others. I'll pass it now to David to talk about another aspect.
Good afternoon, colleagues. So I'm going to speak to the contributions provided to the University of Regina by CCE, that unit led by Dr. Harvey King. So you can see the tremendous contributions from CCE in terms of profit and the sharing of that profit directly with the faculties. And as well, CCE is covering the part of the debt on an annual basis for the College Avenue renewal project. So we have a status quo budget, and these numbers reflect that budget the year gone by. We are aware that there could be some reductions with respect to CCE. and talking with Harvey, for example, ESL, we anticipate a reduction in enrollments in that program, and that's not unique to the University of Regina, but it is a global phenomenon, and every Canadian university is challenged with English as a second language programming. Harvey reassures us that the credit side of CCE is strong, and that is the mainstay in terms of revenue. There are some challenges with the non-credit side of the house, for example, the conservatory. However, I know that Dr. King and his team are innovative and creative, and I'm confident in their abilities to address virtual reality in a way that enhances their program delivery. This next slide shows you the tuition overview. We have the tuition from arts and business, the arts with the lowest tuition level at the university and business with the highest. And you'll see the cost per credit hour per course, and then a full course load, which is 15 credit hours in this particular chart. The visa undergraduate or international students, you can see the costs there for those students. The master's on average, the costs per credit hour, course, and full class. And finally, the Master's of Nursing, Nurse Practitioner. It's one of the more expensive programs, or perhaps the most expensive in terms of tuition, and you can see the figures there. And then finally, the cost for a PhD student. So on the left of this chart, you'll see no tuition or fee increase and a 21.6% decrease in the Levine MBA program tuition. That is predicated on a significant change in that program with respect to international experiences and those not taking place. And I would like to briefly mention enrollments. And I think the president has addressed this in his communication to the campus community as well. But for spring summer terms, the number of students enrolled, the head count is up 9%. We have 800 more students going into spring summer term this year than we did last year. And the credit hours in terms of what our colleagues are teaching is up by 16%. And this data is from May the 4th. So it's the most current data that I have to share with you at the presentation today. Now, there are some caveats, as always with numbers. They tend to be mobile in the sense of stability, but at this time, spring summer terms are looking very good. The fall, it's early on and the numbers are indeed somewhat soft, but we are at present at 0% change in terms of the overall university. We have factored nursing out of that percentage because nursing registers their own students, and they have not had a chance to register students for the fall yet. And so rather than including a minus 697, which is the number of nursing students, we took them out of the equation, but we will factor them back in when it's appropriate. The credit hour teaching is down minus 2%. Again, we will watch carefully these numbers, and I will check in regularly with the registrar's office to apprise the community of any significant changes one way or the other with fall terms. So I'm going to speak now to the academic and academic support decisions. So I think Dave mentioned, briefly addressed some of these points. We do provide some funding to CCE to cover part of their teaching costs for sessional, so they can engage in the profit sharing that they provide to the university writ large. For the programs that are offered in French language programming, in education and La Cité, as Dave mentioned, we have upfronted the monies to these different units, and also to note that there is a very complicated formula by which federal dollars move to the province, move to AE, and then move to the university. And I won't go into that because I really don't understand it fully. But the reality is the monies are there to cover the costs, the expenditures of both the Faculty of Education and La Cité with respect to French language programming. You will have been informed that KH&S, kinesiology, there's a reduction in or elimination of athletic fees rec and athletic fees because the facilities are not open and the students and the faculty are not on campus. So that has resulted in a $471,000 reduction from the budget in kinesiology. And towards the end of the budget, this coming budget year, we will need to address that with kinesiology. And then SAFA, there's a reduction by the province in scholarships to the tune of $12,600. There are 2 one-time allocations in our budget. Monies to support the Student Wellness Center, which is gaining traction over time in terms of its coming to fruition, and as well as to the accommodations testing center. Now the center is not open at this time, likely won't be open in September. However, there are monies that need to be spent and items that need to be purchased for that testing center. So when we do go live again, it's ready to go. I'm now going to invite Kathy McNutt to speak to research decisions.
Thanks for that, David. And I'm just going to address, Peter's got a question in the chat, and I'm just going to address that really, really quickly. Peter, this year's numbers I just asked Dave for indirect costs was 2.5 million. So for research decisions around the budget, we have our base inflationary allocation. This is quite low this year because we did have a CRC1 finish their term, and this will even out next year as we have a CRC coming on board. So it's only $9,000 this year. We also have several one-time allocations. We have $30,000 supporting the Fedora chair and nuclear imaging. This is year 5 of 5. We are hoping to negotiate several more Fedora chairs in the future. So it's a one-time allocation to finish off that particular chair, but we're hoping again to have more chairs in the future. And then it is the second of 2 payments for the university share of the NSERC Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative, and that's $44,000 this year, and that'll be the end of that allocation.
Thank you very much, Kathy. A couple of the places, as I mentioned, basically a status quo budget, although areas that we knew that there is inflation coming and we can't avoid it. We decided we would take and fund those, that was obviously the most appropriate way. So you see those top, 6 different items. We can answer questions about any of them in the question if you like, but they are things like the general, we've got about 40 different software licenses between the IS folks and the library, et cetera, that we pay centrally. And of course, the annual increases there. Similarly, the cost of lease space for our colleagues up in Saskatoon, nursing and social work, et cetera, inflationary costs there. I mentioned the Mackenzie Art Gallery earlier, and of course, this is now the university backstopping the Mackenzie Art Gallery because of the contract we have with them to maintain our collection there. The one that's different is the utilities one, where we have taken a bit of a dividend this year. We know that we're going to be able to make this amount of savings this year just based on the decreased activity at the campus, less heat and lights and doors opening and toilets flushing, etc. But our principle is some of the other things that we haven't bothered to modify the budget in those cases. In this one, if we get all of those provincial initiatives, in fact, we'll be able to drive down the utility costs because of all those sustainable initiatives if they get funded. So we're optimistic there. And on a one-time basis, a number of the faculties are working with the University Advancement and Communications to take and do a pilot for fundraising of people in their unit. And this is year 2 of 4 for that program. Now, normally in this budget, we don't talk an awful lot about ancillaries, but since it is probably the softest spot and one that is being hurt the most as a result of this COVID, we thought it was important to talk about it and give you a sense of comfort in it as well. So first of all, the main principle with ancillaries, and I think we repeat this every time we have one of these forums, is that we don't let the ancillary budget leak into operations and vice versa. So we're not backstopping one or the other, and we're not raising fees, say, to students who are the ones that 85% are the ones that are using these services, in particular food and food bookstore and residents, that we don't want to take and have it leak over and them supporting the operating budget at all. But this year, indeed, the biggest challenge on the campus would be revenue losses on the ancillary side of things. And so what we've shown you here today, you'll see that this was the budget that was prepared and anticipated before COVID hit. We were anticipating being in a pretty good financial position, basically $1.5 million better than last year. So you can see that from the bottom line, even though it's the projection is negative. That's as a result of the major capital initiatives and long-term business planning cycles, investing in capital and paying it over a number of years. If you could see this, the draft financial statements for this year, which is of course just complete and we're just putting together, but it looks like this year we will experience about $1 million better position than budgeted. So the combination of just those 2 years would be $2.5 million. And so we could take and experience that kind of negative impact on our ancillary budget without any serious impact at all. And again, the principle, like all of the other decisions in terms of calmness and compassion, same sort of thing here. Every decision we've tried to make with respect to the ancillary budget, even though it would negatively impact the bottom line, was to take and treat students as fairly as possible, letting any student that wanted to take and withdraw from residence to immediately take and get a proportional refund on their rent. And of course, as everyone knows, ceasing parking costs and things until we get back into normal operations as well. So I'll quickly pass it to David.
Thank you very much, Dave. So just to draw to members' attention that the budget grant letters from the province of Saskatchewan are indeed posted on our website. And those letters address funding to post-secondary education institutions in the province. You will also find the university budget letters posted for full access. I think they're about 8 pages in length this year. And the next couple of slides, they will walk us through some that information. This is located on the ORP area of the website, so hopefully everyone can find that. And I think that's it for this slide, Dave.
Good. So the next series of slides, and people who have obviously been through this before or looked at any of our budget letters, our principle in terms of preparing these budget letters is to, in as transparent a way as we can, to take and illustrate every budget change that happens each and every year. So this year, the list is shorter. When David alludes to 7 or 8 pages for the budget letter this year, it would normally be into the double digits, 12 to 15 pages. So what this reflects is every activity that we're taking and changing. And as you'll notice, there's a couple of red items that we've talked about before. And I'll just quickly flip in case you're thinking that I'm just focusing on the academic units. I'll come back to this one in a moment, but to just show you that it includes all units around campus, that at the end of the day, the bottom right-hand column, 6.6 million is what we're investing in new initiatives at the university. However, having said that, as you can see, there's not very many new initiatives. The second column from the right at the bottom would be the total of our biggest spend, which as everyone knows, 75% of our expenses are salaries. And just to do the salary lifts this year for all of the requirements from the collective agreements, et cetera, is $5.9 million. So you'll see each of your individual faculty or administrative unit numbers up here. And to use the one at the top happens to be art, happens to be a big number. But arts will actually see a budget increase this year of $660,000. And that reflects the requirement that arts in their $17 million budget will need to be able to take and honor the collective agreement salary increases. And so the similar numbers are reflected in proportion for each of the units on campus. And so every unit on campus, even in this strange environment, is getting a budget increase. Now, we recognize that it doesn't address other areas of inflation, and that's something that will be a challenge for each of the units to take and address your inflation in other areas. In part of addressing that, of course, is the fact that there's not as many activities that can be going on, and as such, expenses are anticipated to perhaps be down. Now, to just predict one question, because this is the third time we've actually presented this budget today, so I'll pre-pose a question for you. There's some areas that we know that there's going to be a difficulty achieving particularly revenue targets. And Provost David has explained one in great detail. A place like ESL, which has revenues that come from people that are coming from another country to take and learn, do language training here on campus. As hard as Harvey and his team can work to take and maintain that revenue, the prediction would be that will be near impossible to match current revenues. So there will be a one-time drop in those revenues. We hope and anticipate that we get back to normal at the end of this COVID. I'll give you another example, and then we'll talk about how we're dealing with these. Another example would be in kinesiology and health studies, who in addition to their academic portfolio also take care of all the rec and athletic and the gyms and the fields and things for us. They have hundreds of thousands of dollars of rental income every year for gym rentals, the pool, the football field, the soccer fields, etc. We know that they can't maintain those revenue targets. And so in the first instance, in both cases, we'd ask units like Harvey's and Harold's, and there would be some of these same things in your own units to perhaps smaller degrees that we would hope that you would take and manage them as best you can. And perhaps by decreasing expenses in other areas, that you'll be able to take and balance your budgets in this status quo environment. But if not, then those are ones that we'll obviously recognize from the center and backstop as necessary to take and help you out in those regards. And in that regard, we did not decrease part of the status quo budget, as we do have a contingency budget of about $4 million to take and address exactly things like that. And contingencies, if something like COVID isn't a contingency type environment, I'm not sure what is. So at that point, I think we're ready to turn off the slideshow and get back into questions and such. So I'll end the sharing and pass it for questions for David, Kathy, and I. So I notice who's the first question from us? Is it from Peter, or did it get answered?
It's from Richard. It's from Richard McLean. Richard?
I think Richard provided more of a comment in his explanation, and if I may take the liberty, I mean, it's sent to everyone, so everyone will have read his comment. It's a positive comment.
Okay, thanks. I think Peter and Garth had questions about indirect costs. Did you want to follow up on that at all, or did Kathy's indication of what the volume of it is, was that sufficient?
It's Peter. I guess I would just like to see that the the costs, the revenue generated by research is included in the budget because a lot of these indirect costs are not returned to the faculty, so presumably they're being used in support of university functions that otherwise would have required some money from the budget some way or the other. So it just sort of at the weird light here. It would be useful to see some sense of the magnitude of those. I was really pleasantly surprised by the CCE contributions. They would appear to swamp, excuse me, anything that research would have generated, but I'd like to see the actual numbers, if for no other reason than to know what our scope for improvement might be.
A good point. I'll answer from a finance perspective and things. Ever since the Tri-Councils came out with that, in fact, it has been so helpful to the universities. It takes and reflects some of the true costs of research, and we do get it. It increased slightly this year, increased by 190,000 this year, so we're moving in the right direction. And so thank you for the volume. It's a direct proportion of the success we have in the Tri-Council funding. So it's 2.5 million, and it goes into the pot, much like that 19 million that CCE generates, and the student tuition and the government grant, all goes into the mixing pot that is then what we take and generate the university budget. So indeed, we have to report on it, and we actually reverse engineer it, and every year more than show how there's investments in research to that level of activity. But if it's mainly for information and recognition of the good work done, we can perhaps come up with some way of at least publishing it and showing it. 2.5 million is an important part to our bottom line.
Right, that's just the Tri-Councils. You've also got the contracts and other sources of research-driven revenue. It'd be nice to see an aggregate revenue from research, because we often talk about this being a liberal arts school, and this is generating some revenue as well as training people. So it just would be nice to see it fully included in the budget.
I think that's easily done.
Thank you, Peter. That's a great suggestion.
Any other questions in there? Also, if you didn't want to type, you can put your blue hand up and things. I see Peter's got a blue hand up. Was that an old one or a new one, Peter?
No, I just hate dead air, so I thought I'd fill it. Can you speculate? We've had maybe 10 years of fairly flat faculty budgets in terms, there haven't really been big increases in salary and that. And you could anticipate that this will not continue forever. What sort of challenges are we looking at in the next contract cycle as related to this?
Yeah, actually, Peter, I don't know whether you're predicting a decrease or predicting an increase there in your question and things, but there's no doubt. I know Tom on the last presentation mentioned that his crystal ball was in the dishwasher, and so we're all struggling in terms of what is another shoe going to drop, either with respect to COVID, or how are the feds in the province ever going to get us out of this hole? And that's part of what we thought that was important, to stay calm and conservative in this budget presentation. And so who knows, we may have cutbacks in future years. Every indication is that the province will continue to fund this. Our minister has done an incredible job at the cabinet table to take and get an increase for the post-secondary sector in an environment like this, like even pre-COVID. And so as long as a sector we can continue to show our worth, I think that we'll be relatively safe. As you mentioned, we've managed to balance the budget in the past without any government grants. In fact, over the past number of years, we went -5 and 0, 0, 0, and then 1. I think I've even missed another 0 in there. And so we've done it ourselves. It's through the recruiting and retention and the growth that we've had in our student body that we've been able to manage this. And so if we keep on doing that good work, then we won't be impacted as much by the government grants. So as you say, it sort of pales in comparison to most other matters.
So we've got a question from Laura Smart. The budget includes cost savings from lights, heating, etc. Was there an inherent assumption made about how long this remote work and remote teaching situation will continue? Maybe I'll start to answer that question and invite Kathy and or Dave to join in. You know, we take our directions from the provincial medical officer of health. And at this time, the state of emergency has not been lifted in the province. So there is an Open Saskatchewan plan for phase. When we get to phase 3, I believe it's 15 people can gather, and then there's phase 4 and 5. And the last phase is as far as I understand it, unlimited gathering, but still physical distancing. So I don't know the exact answer to your question, but within the next foreseeable future, the next 4 months, 5 months, I think if we do start to recover from COVID as an institution, it will be incremental, and it will be carefully planned and monitored with physical distancing attended to. So I'm not sure I directly answered your question, except that I think it's our situation, our context for the next at least 4 months or so, and then we'll have to take stock after that. But maybe Dave would like to respond as well to this question.
Sure, and I can tell you that that's a crystal ball type question as well. We had the crystal ball out, and I think that the assumptions were made that we would be on some lower activity levels on campus until the fall. Now that may go a lot further, and even if we did get back to regular things, I think that social distancing and using some of the things that we've benefited from and learned from this modus operandi that will continue to perhaps keep activity levels lower. So that basic number came from something going through the summer.
There's another question from Pat Patton. Dave, are you considering new expenses that we might see as a result of COVID, and how are we going to tackle that?
I think she was asking you. No, very good question. And in fact, there are some new, people are already experiencing the fact that the best example was we had to take and invest in more Zoom licenses and some special Zoom Pro licenses to be able to do things like counseling remotely and still maintain security. So there are some places in this new COVID world, not the least of which is, maybe I'll use a custodial example in your own area, Pat. We probably are spending 100 times as much on sanitizer than we had, hand sanitizer than we had previously. But in the same context, our expenses on toilet paper are way down. So in the first instance, on a unit by unit basis, we'd expect folks to take and invest in the new tools that they need and the new expenses for the new environment. And hopefully you'll find savings from things in your own area. And for the most part, that you'll be able to take and balance and work with this status quo budget that we've given to you. Now, in really unique environments, we'll always be open to discussions and comments about how that just either is not fair or you just can't do it. And so bring those to us. But yeah, lots of new expenses for a new way of business, and hopefully you can manage through them.
So pardon my etiquette for Zoom. I'm going to invite people to ask their questions directly rather than having me read them. So Bjorn, if you wanted to pose your question and turn on your video, then we will there. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You were mentioning that the enrollment for the fall is comparable to the previous year at this point in time, and that is about a 2% drop in actual credit hours. I'm curious about how that separates between domestic and international students, because first, it looks like international students having a hard time to get visas and actually come here or decide to come here. That would also have an impact on the revenue, as international students generally pay a larger amount to the university. So I'm curious about what is success for international students to actually successfully commit, and what are the implications if there are changes to the budget?
A great question. Thank you, Bjorn. You know, what's really interesting is the paradox at play here. So our numbers for international students in the fall are actually up, but they're the returning students. They're already here, and they're engaging in their studies more so than they did this time for the fall last year. But here's the challenge. There are only 52 of them, for example, in the spring summer term who are new students, right? 7 of whom are still in their countries. The other have already arrived in Canada. So the challenge for us and for every other university in North America is, how do we manage to get the students to Canada, to Regina? So, you know, we are looking at an incentive program for international students to make the University of Regina more attractive to them. Things like bundling up tuition credit as part of living in residence, as an example, along with a welcoming bursary. So, I mean, we will do our best to recruit strongly students from afar. The federal government changed their guidelines, so 50% of international students can take their studies in their home countries. Right now, we're not seeing a large number take advantage of that, but that opportunity is there. Part of the challenge with international students is within their own countries, the visa offices aren't necessarily up and running to full capacity. So that's another constraint. But I think we will be in a position to compete with other universities in a very significant way in terms of trying to attract students. But be assured that that challenge to attract international students to our university is faced by every university. So right now, spring, summer, and fall look good in terms of existing or returning students, and we'll have to see how the numbers work out or pan out in terms of new students.
Thanks.
Can I just add to an old question as well before we get to back to Peter's question, just with respect to I think it's good to probably report better, but I was negligent in commenting about contract research. 100% of the overheads for contract research stays within basically that research engine. So between the VP research office, the dean's office, and the individual faculty folks as well. And so it doesn't go into, if I alluded to the fact that it goes into the central pot for redistribution, it's a little bit different. So just wanted to add that.
And then we did answer Laura's question. Thank you, Laura. And Peter, I think, do you have another question about building opportunities?
Yes, thank you. David, I've forgotten when it was, one of the town halls, you'd mentioned this potential federal initiative and then the provincial initiative. I mean, that basically got us part of the RIC building. And you'd mentioned a possible building for business. Do you see other opportunities? And I was thinking, you know, in terms of a building, a custom built building for nursing, or possibly a replacement rather than a refurbishing of the lab building, which is not a great building to begin with.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Peter. And indeed, in the first KIP project, we had about $6 million for the first phase of the lab and built the basement, and then worked our way up in the SIF project. We do anticipate, and we're readying ourselves to do a lab building phase 3 initiative. Whether it would compete or be in addition to, we think it'll probably be in addition to other other initiatives. And so we're readying a number of different projects like that. And so the provincial ones, they're asking for small scale. Most of them were under $1 million. But the federal one, we think will come in big chunks. As you know, we got 2 big chunks for SIF. We got about $30 million for College Avenue campus, and another, I think it was $4.5 million or so for the lab building addition. And we're anticipating something like that, where we'll go for one great big lump sum, and we'll hopefully go for another bundle of smaller ones as well in that federal program.
That's great. Thanks.
Are there any other questions?
Peter had a question for somebody else other than me about faculty contracts. It's too career limiting for me to answer.
It actually was just a correction that my original question about the budgeting was, it's more a commentary that at least part of the doing it by ourselves or doing it on our own without provincial grants has to do with the fact that the last several faculty contracts have not seen substantive increases in salary. And so some of the base budgeting and some of the ability to maintain a 26-year record or string of balanced budgets has to do with, we haven't seen major increases. And I know you and I disagree on the accounting as to what contract stages, steps do to the overall budget, but I'm just talking about percent increase year over year and the fact they've been very low for over a decade.
Thank you, Peter. I'm not seeing any additional questions.
That's pretty good timing. It's 3:58.
Hey, and I saw us peak at about 160 or so participants. So that's pretty good.
Thank you to everybody that joined us today and asked questions and engaged. Again, I think it's a budget that we can all be proud of and move forward in this time. So thank you for joining us, and stay safe and stay well.
Thank you, everybody, for your engagement with the budget presentation this afternoon. And before we close, I do want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Chase, whose leadership has been substantial in this budget initiative. So have a great day and a great week, and we'll catch up with you later, folks.
Thanks, everyone. Now go out and enjoy that beautiful sunny day. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers, everybody.